On a frozen December night in 1991, a mother and her little girl vanished into a white abyss. No goodbyes, no phone call, just gone. For 15 years, they were a ghost story whispered across Montana's icy roads. But in 2006, a long-haul trucker pulled off for a routine brake check and stumbled upon something that would crack open a case buried deep in snow and secrets. What happened to Mary Walsh and her daughter Emma that stormy night? Why did no one find them? And who else might have known where they were all along? It was the start of the Christmas holidays, December 21st, 1991, in the small, frost-bitten town of Whitehaven, Montana. The sky was already darkening by late afternoon, and a wicked blizzard was beginning to claw its way through the valley, whipping snow across rooftops and highways with a force that rattled window panes. Mary Walsh, a 32-year-old single mother, packed up her modest white Jeep Cherokee in near silence, her movements brisk and jittery, as if something or someone were chasing her. Her 6-year-old daughter Emma stood nearby, clutching a faded stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide and questioning. The neighbors didn't see them leave, but they noticed the lights go off and the garage door close just before dusk. Inside the house, untouched dinner plates sat on the kitchen counter, and a half-written letter rested near the phone. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but the tone was fearful, urgent. "I have to go. I can't stay here. I just hope this isn't too late." Mary was known around Whitehaven as polite but distant, a woman carrying unseen weight. She worked part-time at the local diner, never spoke of her past, and rarely allowed anyone inside her home. Some said she was running from an abusive marriage. Others believed she was hiding from something more sinister, maybe something criminal. On the night she disappeared, she had called her sister in Idaho, saying she was finally coming to visit, that she needed a fresh start, and that she and Emma would be there by morning. But she also said something odd. "Don't call the house. Just wait for me. I'll explain everything when I get there." Her sister sensed something was wrong. There was a tremble in Mary's voice, a hurried, frightened edge. She asked what was going on. Mary hesitated, then whispered, "I think he found us." Before her sister could ask who she meant, the line went dead. Later that night, temperatures dropped below zero, and the snowstorm worsened. Most roads were closed by midnight. Search efforts the next day were hampered by snowdrifts several feet deep. Police initially assumed Mary and Emma had skidded off an icy highway, but there was no sign of the Jeep, no broken guardrails, no fresh tire tracks. The state police initiated a grid search, helicopters were called in, and volunteers combed the surrounding forests. But it was as if mother and daughter had been swallowed whole by the storm. Days passed, then weeks. The case gained traction across the state. Local news ran constant updates. Flyers with Emma's wide smile were taped to diner windows and gas stations. But the blizzard had erased nearly every trace, and Mary's name became just another haunting headline. Mother and daughter vanish in Montana whiteout. As time passed, speculation grew darker. Some believed Mary had planned her disappearance, that she faked her escape to start a new life. But her bank accounts remained untouched. Her social security number was never used again. Emma was never enrolled in any school under any alias. Others whispered more disturbing theories, that Mary had been killed, that someone wanted her silenced, and that the storm was just a convenient mask. Her ex-husband, a man with a violent temper and a history of restraining orders, was questioned multiple times but had an alibi. Still, many locals believed he knew more than he let on. Police searched his property twice but found nothing. In time, even her family began to fracture. Her sister believed Mary was dead. Her brother thought she had simply run off. Her mother, a devout Catholic, insisted she was alive and waiting to be found. But one thing stood out to investigators from the beginning. Mary hadn't just driven into a snowstorm. She was running from something. Why else would she leave behind unopened Christmas gifts under the tree, a nearly full tank of heating oil, and even her dog? The most chilling clue remained the letter left on the counter, unfinished, trembling in its final words. It didn't read like a note from someone escaping to freedom. It read like a confession or a warning. Investigators kept the letter, scanned for fingerprints, even analyzed the handwriting for hidden meaning, but nothing definitive ever came from it. It was merely a ghostly imprint of a woman no one truly knew. And then came the silence. No new leads, no bodies, no vehicle. Just 15 years of silence. Her case was added to the state's cold case list, and each year on December 21st, a candlelight vigil was held outside the local church. Emma would have been 21 in 2006. Mary would have turned 47. But all that remained were fading photographs, unanswered questions, and a deepening sense that something darker had unfolded that night. Something more than a simple accident. Whitehaven residents continued to tell the story of the mother and daughter who drove into a storm and vanished without a trace. Some claimed they heard cries in the forest on snowy nights. Others said they saw headlights flicker off the tree line near Glacier Pass, but nothing was ever confirmed. By the mid-2000s, the case had all but disappeared from headlines. New tragedies took its place, but there was always someone, an officer, a friend, a lonely relative, who couldn't forget Mary Walsh and her daughter. Because something about that night didn't make sense. Something about the way she fled, the fear in her voice, and the eerie lack of physical evidence suggested a puzzle with missing pieces. One investigator, who worked the case for 7 years, said, "Mary didn't vanish. She was hidden. The snow just did the rest." In the weeks following Mary and Emma Walsh's disappearance, the search transformed from a rescue mission into a desperate investigation, tangled in theories, whispers, and long silences. The snow had swallowed every clue, and investigators were left clutching at possibilities rather than evidence. Mary's white Jeep Cherokee seemed to have evaporated into thin air. Roadside cameras, sparse in that region of Montana in 1991, offered nothing. There were no witnesses, no gas station receipts, and not a single confirmed sighting after 6:17 p.m., the time she was last seen leaving Whitehaven. As the temperature dropped and snow continued to fall, authorities halted the search, citing dangerous conditions. Officially, it was logged as a possible accident due to inclement weather, but even the officers who signed off the report admitted it didn't feel right. She hadn't been reckless. She hadn't taken back roads. She'd taken the safest route she knew, and somehow she still vanished. Mary's family pleaded for more to be done, holding vigils and press conferences. Her sister Rachel appeared on a local talk show in early 1992, her voice cracking as she read the final words from Mary's unfinished note. "I just hope this isn't too late." But sympathy slowly gave way to skepticism. Whispers began circulating in town, morphing grief into rumor. Had Mary staged her own disappearance? Had she crossed someone? Was it suicide or murder? Some locals recalled how reclusive she had become in the final months, how she sometimes flinched at loud noises, how she kept Emma close, never allowing the girl to sleep over at friends' houses. Others remembered odd visitors, one man in particular, driving a dark green pickup, who showed up at Mary's diner shift twice in 1 week. No one ever saw him again. But the most unsettling development came 2 years later, when the case had all but faded from public memory. In the summer of 1993, an anonymous letter arrived at the Whitehaven Sheriff's Office. It was typewritten on plain paper, with no return address. It read, "You're looking in the wrong place. They're not far. Trust the trees." Investigators traced the postmark to Kalispell, a town 100 miles north. But that was all. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, just cryptic words that deepened the mystery. The letter didn't match anything already in evidence, and the phrase "trust the trees" chilled detectives. Some believed it was a cruel hoax. Others believed it was the only real clue they'd ever received. That same letter was followed by a second, nearly identical, in 1995. "The snow hides what you missed. They're still waiting." And then, nothing more. The investigation reopened briefly. A new team retraced the original route Mary might have taken toward Idaho, employing cadaver dogs and even ground-penetrating radar in forested sections near Glacier Pass, where snow and ice lingered year-round. But again, nothing turned up. Some of the original detectives started speculating about something darker. Had Mary been running from a person or from something she knew? Former detective Alex Granger, now retired, shared years later, "I believe she stumbled onto something. Maybe she witnessed something she shouldn't have. The way she left, panicked, half prepared, it wasn't just a mother afraid of a storm. It was a woman fleeing a predator. Attention turned briefly to Mary's ex-husband, Daniel Walsh, a former construction worker with a short temper and a history of controlling behavior. He had filed for custody of Emma the year before, unsuccessfully. Records revealed multiple domestic incidents during their marriage, though no charges were ever filed. Daniel claimed he had been in Billings the night Mary disappeared, visiting his brother. That alibi, confirmed by phone records, kept him from becoming a suspect, at least officially. But some in the community always believed he was involved. He used to tell Mary she'd never make it on her own, a co-worker of Mary's confided. He used to say, "You leave me, you disappear." Those were his words, disappear. Yet the evidence wasn't there. And over time, the mystery was boxed, stored, and buried under layers of newer tragedies. Mary and Emma became ghost stories for children to whisper about in winter, legends passed down like cautionary tales. If you drive through Glacier Pass in a storm, don't stop, they'd say, or the white Jeep will find you. It was easy to mythologize the missing when there was nothing left of them but fading photographs and secondhand memories. But Mary's sister never stopped believing her sister hadn't just died in the snow. She'd been silenced. "She was trying to tell us something," Rachel said in an interview years later. "She was warning us, but we didn't listen in time." Despite a few fresh leads over the years, an abandoned piece of fabric found in the woods, a psychic's vague vision, a report of a woman matching Mary's description in northern Idaho, nothing ever panned out. The case remained cold, sealed in boxes in the county evidence room. And then, just as the trails seemed permanently frozen, a call came in on January 3rd, 2006, that would change everything. A truck driver near Glacier Pass had pulled over during a brake check and spotted something odd glinting beneath the snowline. Something metallic, something white. It was January 3rd, 2006. 15 years since Mary and Emma Walsh had vanished without a trace. The bitter Montana winter had gripped Glacier Pass again, but the storms had briefly calmed, leaving the mountains eerily quiet beneath a pale gray sky. Truck driver Hank Braddock, hauling lumber across the remote mountain route, pulled over near mile marker 112 for a routine brake check. As he stepped out into the freezing air, something in the snowbank caught his eye. A rusted piece of metal, half buried and glinting in the weak afternoon light. Curiosity and instinct led him to scrape away at the ice, revealing more than metal. A tire, then a headlight, and finally the unmistakable frame of a white Jeep Cherokee, wedged between a cluster of pine trees just 30 feet off the road, hidden for years beneath shifting snow and fallen branches. Heart pounding, Hank radioed it in. Within hours, state police arrived, cordoning off the area. The plate was a match. After all these years, they had found Mary's car. The vehicle had plunged down a steep embankment, its crash softened by trees, explaining why there had been no visible wreckage from the road above. As forensic teams worked carefully to extract the Jeep, the past emerged from the ice, horrifying and haunting. Inside the front seat, preserved by the cold, lay skeletal remains, later confirmed to be Mary Walsh through dental records. But the back seat, the space where 6-year-old Emma should have been, was empty. No remains, no trace, only a small pink ribbon wedged between the seats and Emma's stuffed rabbit, faded but intact, lying on the floor. That single discovery reframed the entire case. Mary had died in the crash, but Emma might have survived. The revelation sent shockwaves through the town of Whitehaven and across the country. News reports resurrected the long-cold case, this time with a chilling new headline: "Daughter may have survived 1991 snowstorm crash. Where is Emma Walsh?" Forensic experts dated the crash to within hours of Mary's last phone call. They concluded that Mary likely lost control during whiteout conditions and tumbled off the road, but not immediately fatally. Evidence suggested she might have survived for hours, possibly even a day, trapped and injured. But the most haunting question remained unanswered. What happened to Emma? Had she wandered away in the snow, never to be found? Had someone found her and never told? The possibility that someone had taken Emma, either by chance or design, transformed the tragedy into a chilling mystery. Posters with an age-progressed image of what Emma might look like at 21 began circulating again. The case was reopened, this time not as a recovery, but as a search. Somewhere out there, the little girl lost in the snowstorm might still be alive. Or perhaps she had grown up, unaware of who she truly was. Either way, the discovery of the Jeep answered one question and raised 100 more. The discovery of Mary Walsh's frozen remains reignited the case with furious intensity, and now all eyes turned to the question that haunted investigators, media, and the public alike. What happened to Emma? The stuffed rabbit found in the Jeep suggested she'd been in the car at the time of the crash, but the complete absence of her body, clothing, or footprints around the scene led to one inescapable theory. Emma had survived. The story gripped the nation. A little girl lost in a blizzard, possibly rescued or abducted. Within weeks, search teams canvassed the surrounding forest again, this time with fresh urgency. Cadaver dogs scoured the icy terrain. Old cabin sites were rechecked. A new team of FBI profilers was brought in. They concluded that if Emma had wandered from the scene, her remains would have been found long ago. But if she had been taken, perhaps by someone who lived nearby or passed by the same lonely road, then she might still be alive. Leads began to trickle in. A retired woman in Kalispell recalled a neighbor who'd moved suddenly in 1992, bringing with him a quiet blonde girl who never spoke. A teenage girl in Oregon reached out, saying she'd always felt like she didn't belong to the family who raised her. DNA tests were ordered. Most were dead ends. But one sample pulled from a high school volunteer database in northern Idaho set off alarms. It bore partial markers linked to the Walsh family line. Investigators moved fast. A quiet college student named Emily Shaw was called in for a private interview. She had no criminal record, no red flags, but her birth certificate was fake. Her memories of early childhood? Fragmented, broken. Something in her eyes changed when they showed her the stuffed rabbit. She whispered, "I've seen that before." Emily Shaw sat in the small interview room, hands trembling as officers slid the faded stuffed rabbit across the table. Her breath caught. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "I used to sleep with this," she whispered. Over the next several hours, the truth unraveled like a tightly wound thread. DNA confirmed it. Emily Shaw was Emma Walsh. She had survived the 1991 crash, but she hadn't wandered off. She had been taken. At just 6 years old, disoriented and freezing, she'd been pulled from the wreckage by a man, Harold Greeley, a reclusive former forest ranger who lived less than 2 miles from the crash site. A loner with no family, no record, and no history of violence. He raised her as his own, claiming her mother died in the snow. He changed her name, forged documents, and moved twice to keep suspicions low. Emily remembered flashes. A white car, a woman calling her name, then darkness, snow, and strange hands lifting her. Harold had died in 2003, taking most of the secret with him, but now the impossible had become real. Emma had returned. The town of Whitehaven held its breath. Mary Walsh, once buried beneath ice and time, was finally laid to rest, and her daughter, long thought lost to tragedy, was alive. As reporters swarmed, Emma, now Emily, stood before a sea of cameras, her voice steady but raw. "My mother tried to save me, and somehow, she did." The mystery was solved, but healing and identity would take much longer. The wind whispered softly through the pines as snowflakes drifted down over Whitehaven Cemetery. A modest crowd had gathered, old neighbors, law enforcement officers who'd worked the case, and a few strangers drawn by the story. A fresh headstone stood beside a small memorial for Emma that had remained untouched for years. Now a single name had been added beneath Mary's. Emma Grace Walsh, found. Emily stood at the gravesite in silence, her breath visible in the cold air, clutching the stuffed rabbit, now faded, matted, but still whole. In her other hand, she held a photo of her and Mary, taken months before the crash. She had no memory of that day, but the woman in the picture smiled, like she had known this moment would come. A soft hand touched her shoulder. It was Rachel, her aunt. For first time they embraced, not as strangers bound by tragedy, but as family reunited by truth. As snow thickened, Emily looked out over the valley where the Jeep had been found. Somewhere in that frozen forest, her story had begun and nearly ended. But against all odds, she had survived. Not just the crash, not just the lie, but the silence that followed. A camera crew packed up in the distance. Reporters turned off their microphones. The world would move on, but Emily didn't. She knelt, placed the rabbit gently at the base of the grave, and whispered through the snowfall, "I made it, Mom. I'm home." Fade to black. 15 winters covered their grave with snow. 15 birthdays passed in silence, and still, no clear answers. Mary Walsh and little Emma remain a chilling reminder of how secrets like snow can bury truth. But they didn't stay buried forever.